In your politics on this Thursday morning, social media on fire with criticism against CNN for giving former President Trump a platform to espouse repeated lies about the 2020 election. The former president spent the majority of the 70-minute town hall doubling down on many truths that have been fact-checked to be absolutely false, and even called E. Jean Carroll a whack job. Here to discuss this and so much more is Caroline Heldman, professor of critical theory and social justice at Occidental College. Good morning, Caroline.
Good morning, Giselle. Good to see you.
Good to see you. A lot of enraged viewers last night. Your takeaway from a night where the former president concentrated on the past, doubled down on lies, to a cheering conservative crowd.
Well, it was nothing new. We've certainly heard this from him for 4 years in the presidency and the years since. But I will say I had a physical reaction of being reminded of the chaos of his presidency. Whether you like him, you hate him, something in between. I don't know if there is an in between, but my reaction was, oh gosh, I remember the 4 years when he was president and how chaotic that was. And I think that the more we see him on the campaign trail, the more many Americans will be reminded of that chaotic period of time.
I have to ask you about the platform itself. CNN already in trouble ratings-wise. Obviously trying to include more conservative voices. Chris Licht, the new chief of CNN, basically on a call this morning saying we served America well by having this town hall. Others, critics say they gave the former president a 70-minute commercial. A mistake for CNN, or does this serve the country?
Well, I don't ever think that media outlets should be in the business of deciding who they're going to feature. If you have a prominent presidential contender, and Trump is way ahead in the polls, he is a top Republican contender. So I don't think they should be deciding who they're going to be platforming. They absolutely need to platform him going into this election, just in terms of the role that media should be playing. Now, with that said, are they also going to give this to Biden, who is the front runner on the Democratic side?
All right, let's drill down on some of the big takeaways. Despite pushback from the host, who tried really hard, the former president still claimed the 2020 election was rigged, doubled down on multiple election fraud lies, including that the ballot boxes were stuffed. Does still refusing to admit defeat in 2020 play with independence? Because that's where it matters right now.
Well, we know that 1 in 3 Americans overall believes the big lie. And of course, Republicans are far more likely than independents or Democrats to believe that. Although I will say about 1 in 4 independents believe the big lie. So it will play with some of them, but not with the majority. And I think, Donald Trump was doing a delicate dance last night of throwing a lot of red meat to his supporters while at the same time avoiding or, double speaking on topics that he knows are not going to play well in the general election. And the big lie is one of these issues.
So his appearance obviously took place just one day after he was found guilty of sexual abuse, yet he still went after E. Jean Carroll. Take a listen.
Then I say, if she was being raped, and by the way, they said she wasn't raped, okay? That was her charge. It wasn't.
They found that you sexually abused her.
No, I have no idea who the hell. She's a whack job.
Calling E. Jean Carroll a whack job. If his attorneys are planning to file an appeal, how does Trump's continued attacks impact that process?
Well, it's interesting. They say they're going to file an appeal, but if they do, it takes it right into the primary election and possibly into the general election. So I know he's using a lot of bluster here, but at the end of the day, this does not help him with independents and Democratic voters, and maybe some Republican women in particular. He was found guilty of both, lying about it and defaming her, as well as sexual misconduct. So again, we see Trump, really throwing red meat to his base, but realizing that it's going to harm him with a lot of voters going into the general election.
Carolina, on Ukraine, the former president said the war would never have happened if he were president. He said he could end it in 24 hours. He said we're sending too many weapons to Ukraine, that Europe is not doing enough. He also refused to say if Putin was a war criminal or if he wanted Ukraine to win, and doubled down saying withholding aid from Ukraine was a perfect call. What does all this tell you about how he'd handle Ukraine if he were president?
If he were elected president, it is obvious that he would withdraw support from Ukraine, and which would have, a global effect. This is a proxy war for democracy, as we've been saying. And at the end of the day, he emboldened Putin for 4 years, and he went after Zelensky. And if you recall, he initially was very much against protecting Ukraine in the early days. So Donald Trump bears some of the responsibility for emboldening Putin when it comes to invading Ukraine.
On the abortion front, where the majority of Americans do not approve of the overturning of Roe, the former president once more doubled down, said he was proud of the reversal, but would not commit to a federal abortion ban. What does that tell you?
Well, here's that dance again, right? He's definitely speaking to the Republican base, most of whom support the overturn of Roe v. Wade. But then 85% of Americans believe in some form of abortion or support some form of abortion. And about 60% are really upset that it was overturned. So I imagine that, as has been the case with elections since the overturn of Roe, it will play a major outsized role for Democrats and independents heading into 2024.
When asked about the January 6th attack, the former president called it a beautiful day, said he would pardon the majority of insurrectionists, called them patriots, and called a black Capitol Police captain a thug. How does this impact Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation?
Yeah, I'm shaking my head because, we maybe have the political memory of a goldfish, but I think that the images from that particular day are seared in the brains of millions of Americans. So Trump can't just go back and revise that. He can't defend the actions that day that caused the death of 5 people, that caused, over 100 officers to be wounded. I don't think this necessarily affects the investigation. Jack Smith is just going to look at the facts. But I don't think this is the approach that's going to play well with Americans who watch this unfold in real time.
Right. There's so much to get to, but I do have to ask you about the other big headline, the debt ceiling deadline looming. The former president telling Republicans, hold the line unless there are major budget cuts, even if there is a default. If his grip on the Republican Party is that tight, what does that tell you about where we are heading with this default potential?
This is a scary place. We haven't been here. A decade ago in 2011, when we got close to default, it cost $19 billion in terms of downgrading our credit rating. This is a really dire situation, and it's one where individual members of Congress like Marjorie Taylor Greene or extremists have an outsized role in determining this. This is something that's happened over 100 times in the past. It happened 3 times under Trump. There's no reason to politicize it now, especially given what is at stake.
Yeah, but it is being politicized, as you know. So before I do let you go, I have to ask you about Title 42, set to expire at midnight tonight. Thousands already lining up at the border. There is no movement from Congress on any significant immigration reform, it seems, something the country overwhelmingly wants, according to polls. If both parties don't do it, who wins this narrative going into 24?
Well, it doesn't necessarily affect Biden in the same way it would affect a Republican candidate, because Democrats and independents have immigration as being less of a pressing issue than Republicans. But at the end of the day, yes, you're noting that it's been a bipartisan failure to address this issue. And it's a pressing issue in a nation that is a nation of immigrants. We have a humanitarian crisis at the border. So the question is, will we actually see any movement, given that racism has played such a major role in the way this has been framed by right-wing media in the last 10 years.
We live in such complicated times, as we've said all year, several years now, never a dull moment. Caroline Heldman, professor of critical theory and social justice at Occidental College, thank you so much for always bringing us your expertise and perspective. We appreciate you.